Let's bring in Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. He sits on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This hearing, as we just heard there, may be the last time the public at least hears from the Select Committee before the midterm elections. What outstanding questions do you have, and what case do you think they should be making to the American people on Wednesday?
Well, thanks for having me, Eamon. And I would tell you that a couple things need to happen now. First, the record, the historical record needs to be painted with a great deal of specificity, right? Remember that a year ago, there were people making the case that this was just a riot that got out of hand and gosh, nobody knew nothing. We now know, because of the remarkable work of the committee, that this was actually a plan that had been thought about in advance, that had a, ludicrous as it was, had a legal theory behind it and had an awful lot of people working on it. And I should point out that, apparently we're going to hear from Ginny Thomas, perhaps others who are looking to salvage some semblance of a reputation out of this. So, a lot depends on what more comes down the pike. The second thing I would say, and that is really critical here, is that a lot of the hope of the coup attempt lay on crazy ideas like the notion that the vice president could just stop the count. And that's why the passage of the Electoral Count Act in the House and in the Senate and the turning of that into law is really essential, because we really got to clear up some of the ambiguity that allowed these crazy theories to burble up.
Yeah, and it was an act that only got 9 Republican votes in the House, so it tells you really where the GOP's headspace is on trying to shore up our democracy. Let me, if I can, sir, play for you what Congressman Jamie Raskin had to say just this morning on Meet the Press in regards to an allegation that was made by Denver Riggleman, who I should note is a former Republican lawmaker who served on the committee staff. Riggleman claimed that the White House switchboard connected to a rioter's phone during the Capitol riot. Watch this.
That's one of thousands of details that obviously the committee is aware of. To me, it's interesting, but much less interesting than the fact that Donald Trump told the crowd in public, you got to fight like hell.
And just to be clear here, while Raskin does acknowledge the committee is aware of that call, there's still a lot we don't know, including who placed the call, even if they were in a position of authority, or where it fits into the broader investigation. But what is your reaction just to that revelation as we know about it?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, Eamon. Denver is a good friend of mine. We traveled a lot together when he was in Congress, and I like him a lot. He's also selling a book right now, right? And so, there is a tendency to try to tease, concepts that might help in that process. So it's really hard to know that. What we do know, and what is really important here, maybe that means something. Look, Mark Meadows, chief of staff, somehow we've sort of let him get away without telling us everything that he knows. I mean, if there's one guy in the White House who almost certainly kind of knows what all the pieces are, it's Mark Meadows. And as you'll recall, he testified a little bit and then he didn't want to testify. And so, the other big piece here, Eamon, that needs to happen, of course, if the Republicans take control, heaven forbid, of the House in the next election, this committee will certainly be disbanded by early January of next year. So the other critical thing here is that they need to take this as far as they can and then make sure that every last fact, every shred of evidence, everything is available to the Department of Justice, because, as you know, the Department of Justice is undertaking their own investigation right now.
And speaking of Mark Meadows and also the revelation that Ginny Thomas has reached an agreement with the committee to speak to them, what do you think the committee should find out from her regarding her alleged involvement in this election subversion effort? What would you want the committee to pursue in that interview with Ginny Thomas, which would most likely happen after Wednesday?
So the key question here, Eamon, is who, and, from Donald Trump on down to Rudy Giuliani to Sidney Powell to the whole clown car of characters, who knew that they were committing fraud, right? That they were fraudulently making the case and that the election should be overturned. I do think that Ginny Thomas can probably cast some light on that, because apparently she was calling all sorts of people. For somebody to say, gosh, I thought the election was corrupt and therefore I said that, that's a big, huge legal problem, right? But if Ginny Thomas can shed light on people or groups, whoever it might be, who knew that this was fraudulent but pursued it anywhere, that's when you start getting into the realm of criminal charges.
Let me, if I can, Congressman, switch gears to the Department of Justice's investigation into the ex-president's improper storage of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. As I mentioned, you sit on the Intelligence Committee, which in the wake of that search was informed that there would be a damage assessment by the Director of National Intelligence. That review recently resumed after the appeals court reversed this bizarre judge's ruling, I should note, out of Florida. When does your committee expect to receive a classified briefing on that damage assessment? Can you shed any light onto where things stand?
It should be very soon. Obviously, we had a multi-week delay because of this outrageous decision on the part of the judge, which, as you point out, the appeals court overruled. But there's been a multi-week delay now in the ability of the Director of National Intelligence to do the damage assessment. But that, as you might imagine, is a very high priority right now. Why? Not just because Congress needs to know, but because, were any of those materials to have, put in danger a source, this could be anything from a person in a place like Islamabad or Kabul or what have you, or given away technical information, that is life and death stuff. So you can bet that the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, is putting all resources behind this, and we'll have answers soon.
And very quickly, Congressman, do you, just because we brought it up earlier, the Electoral Reform Act, do you believe that it will pass, ultimately pass both the Senate and the House and have some kind of compromise between the two versions?
I do think so. I've heard that they're making good progress in the Senate. I have less visibility into that. But, as you pointed out, a tiny number of Republicans voted for it. And I just don't get that, right? This is something that is symmetrical. It wouldn't happen. But Democrats could use this ambiguity against Republicans. And so my hope is that the Senate moves, and when that happens, it will become law because we will pass it in the House with or without the support of Republicans.
All right, Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut, sir, thank you so much for spending some of your evening with us tonight.
Thank you, Eamon.